at. I went networking to build relationships with people, so I didn't enjoy the experience. And I had an idea for my clients to start something new. So I'd been a member of a business network for 7 or 8 years at that point, and I left. And a friend of mine said, I think you should start your own thing. And my idea was just to have one group where we facilitate conversations. I used to run something very similar in person. A friend of mine had a restaurant and he'd let me use his restaurant. And we'd sit people down on tables of 4. So there'd be 4 people sat on a table and we would facilitate conversations. So it was structured but loose. So we would encourage people to start by introducing themselves first. Whereas at most events, people introduce themselves by their name, their job title, and their business. In our heads, I think secretly we switch off when we hear some of these things. If I started by introducing myself as an accountant, we think, I've already got an accountant, I don't need another one. It's another coach, it's another, and we switch off. When people introduce themselves first, so I'm a dad, I've got 3 kids. They're 14, 20, and 22. I've got a dog. I love to be out walking my dog when I'm not working. Stein, I love my barbecues. You might call them braais, but I'm an all year round. So I live in the UK. So right now it's about 3 or 4 degrees outside. It's been raining. I barbecue all year round here. I like travel, and I've just come back from 11 nights in Dubai. So it's interesting to know that you're based in Dubai as well. And I think that when we start introducing ourselves by the person first, we find that we've got things in common with people. If we just do name, job title, business, people pigeonhole us and may or may not want to speak to us. Equally, I find that getting to know the person first pushes some people away, which is fine, or brings them closer towards us. And the idea of that is in our community that you find the people that you connect with. You don't need to waste time having meetings with people who are not the right people. We've done a lot of work on our brand values as well, and one of them is PLU. And that is people like us. So when you get good at spotting people like us, you lean in and you move closer to them and you can build good relationships. People say to me, what's the opposite of that? Well, they're people not like us. So those are the people that just want to take things from us. The clients that never want to pay the price that you want to charge. They always want something cheaper. They always haggle with you. They always want it cheaper, for free, more, never pay you on time. And you dread picking up the phone. I want to deal with people that when the phone rings, I smile and I look forward to speak to them. Not, oh no, it's Jamie on the phone, I don't want to speak to him. So that was what I set out to create. And it was only ever to create one group. Through my frustration with networking, and I'd networked for a long time. I was not the first person to invent networking. It's been going for many, many years before me. But it was a frustration that I spotted and that other people had as well. Fast forward 5 years, we are now operating across the UK, in Sweden, in South Africa, in Dubai, in the US, and we have members in 20 different countries around the world. And we're growing. I've recently partnered with a friend of mine who also spotted a problem that people had. He's based in Dubai and he was from a financial services background, and he saw how financial advisors around the world were struggling with social media content creation. So he started a business called Sameli, which stands for Social Media Library. And it's an AI, it's a hybrid platform. If you can imagine the baby from ChatGPT and Canva that can schedule and post content. So AI learns your brand and will create branded content that makes it easy for people and saves them time on content creation and distribution. So there's a common theme here, spotting problems that people have and coming up with ways to fix it. Generally, and I fixed the problem for me, and other people wanted the same solution as well. And that has grown. We operate on a licensee model. So we've got 35 licensees running their own groups in different countries, and it's growing and growing. I came across a book recently, which is perfect for this as well. Has anybody ever heard of Waze? So Waze is a travel app that helps you learn where the traffic updates are, where the traffic jams are in your way. What I didn't realize was that Waze was one of the early unicorn businesses that was bought by Google in 2013 for $1 billion. I had no idea that Google owned it, and I've been using it for years. He's written a book, Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution. So if anyone's interested, that's a great book that fits into the theme of today, because it's about spotting the problems that people have and fixing them for people. It doesn't need to be something brand new. It's just identifying it. If you think back to 2000, the mid 2000s, some of us may not remember this, but in the early 2000s, BlackBerry dominated the mobile phone market. And the biggest thing that they talked about was how good their keyboard was. And I was one of those people, when I was in the corporate world, I had a BlackBerry. It was attached to me, and I loved it and I used it. I did not want a smartphone with a touch screen. And Apple identified an opportunity there and completely invented a whole new marketplace in the world that nobody asked for. None of us were sat there thinking, I wish I had a phone that didn't have a keyboard. And if you watch the BlackBerry film that came out recently, they didn't think that it was a threat. They completely ignored it. So there's a huge opportunity for us as business owners to identify something that's a problem for us. Based on our knowledge and experience, if we start speaking to other people about it, if it's a problem for us, there's a good chance it's a problem for somebody else. And then we can work to fix that solution. It doesn't need to be something that people have never done before. We might just have a new way of doing it. There's a friend of mine based up in Scotland. She lives in a very rural area up in the north of Scotland. So Elsa runs a brand strategy business. In the old world, before the pandemic, she would have struggled to find clients outside of her local area. But I think there's a huge opportunity for us now in this cloud-based world with webinars and technology and Zoom calls and Google Meet and social media on the rise that we can build a client base around the world. She's very niche. She helps people with their brand strategy. She's not a graphic designer. She doesn't do designs, but she'll help them create the strategy that they need. And because she's crystal clear on that, and she's identified that a lot of people have this problem, they can create posts. They have a brand. They have a logo usually. And that was my experience. I had a logo early on in my business. A friend of mine designed a logo. I thought I had a brand. What I didn't realize was I just had a business. And she helped me see that by creating a brand strategy, that could change that. Going back to Stein's point about word of mouth, I've told so many people about Elsa's business and she's picked up clients across the UK and internationally just based on me recommending her. I'll go right back to the start of my presentation. We built a business community built on relationships. We all will have an experience of some kind and we tell other people about it. So we might buy a new car, we'll tell other people how great the car is. We'll go and watch a new movie at the cinema and we'll tell other people about it. We'll go to a restaurant and rave about it to our friends and generate business for other people. But those businesses, those organizations never do anything back for us. There's no reciprocity. If we start doing that for the people that are in our world, that service the same clients as us, when I look after a client and do a good job for them, they trust me. I fix a problem for them. If I then ask a few questions, I can find out that maybe they need someone to help in other parts of their business, and I can recommend other people. So if you see your client at the core of this, and then find out what are the other problems that they face, and meet other people that can fix those problems, you become what's called a key person of influence. And if anyone's read Daniel Priestley's book, that's what can help you elevate your business and change lots of people's lives. So have a think about. I never set out to create a global business. It just happened by fixing a problem for people. I found that people were frustrated with online networking. We've then expanded into in-person events, and I've just come back from Dubai, from running some in-person events in Dubai last week. So what starts as a very simple problem that people have, people are frustrated with lead generation, they find it hard to find new clients, that just by building good relationships with the right people, reciprocity kicks in when we help those people. And that's how I've built an international business over the last 5 years. Thank you very much, Stein.
Jamie, thank you very much. I resonate so much with what you're saying. I mean, myself as well, having been in Dubai now for about 11 years. And we sometimes, I think we make the mistake of thinking that these things are regional. I'll often hear people saying things like, we've had our business now for about 6 years, 7 years, going on 7 years. But I often hear the comment where people say, well, in this part of the world, and then they come with, you have to advertise, you have to build relations, I think this human element, the human touch, what you've clearly illustrated, I mean, just based on how globally present you are, is it's a universal thing. I mean, I think there might be differences in how you build relationships. Like you mentioned the barbecue and the braai. So maybe if you're going to do business with a South African, or you want to build a relationship, maybe you'll tap into a little bit of what they like. What's their tradition. They like sport and they like braai or barbecue. Here in this part of the world, I mean, I spend a lot of time in there's a place downtown called Wafi Gourmet. I don't know whether you've been there before. That's where I have my sisha and my green tea, and even during Ramadan we go after hours. We see you kind of, I think you contextualize it from a traditional perspective to that part of the world, as we call it. But I think it's very global. I mean, have you experienced a lot of sort of cultural nuance differences in this efforts of yours to build relationships?
So I never anticipated that this would become international. I started it just to fix a problem that I had and other people liked it. And it was the first a friend of mine in Sweden that said, I love what you're doing here. Can I launch it here? And the word of mouth element. So if I'll give you a quick example of this. So in the southeast of England, somebody joined our network. She introduced me to somebody up in the north of Scotland. He introduced me to a friend of his that's based in South Africa, and she loved the format and launched it in South Africa. She introduced me to somebody that used to live in South Africa that now lives in Dubai, and she launched one of our groups in Dubai. She invited another friend of hers who's Polish, living in Dubai, who introduced me to her sister that lives in the US, and that's how we launched in the US. So we've continued to expand organically through word of mouth, and what's at the heart of this is people want to feel connected to people, regardless of where they are in the world. And I think most of us now live in a world and offer services that, as long as people can speak the same language as us and they're on a similar time zone, we can do business with people around the world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, I do want to open the discussion a little bit on related topics as well. There's one thing that I've been thinking about. Maybe Renee or Rain, I can bring you in on this. One thing I've been thinking about as Jamie was talking is, yeah, I often come across, because I also obviously in my work of strategy, you end up a lot of times having to consult or help entrepreneurs, startups, people that they want to start their own business. It happens frequently with me, probably with you as well, Rain, where you facilitate a session for someone that's part of an organization, whether it's public or private. And then, during the coffee break, you'll be approached by somebody that says, man, I actually want to start my own business. And a question that I often get is, someone comes to me and they say to me, you know what, I have this problem that I've identified. I believe that there's a real need. So they're very convinced of what it is that they want to do. They're very excited. Obviously, it's a new idea. They've got a lot of confidence, and they really just want to work for themselves. It's more the passion of, and the idea of working for myself than the actual business concept. And the question to you is, I mean, if a founder sort of strongly believes in the problem that they're experiencing personally, but they go out there and the initial feedback is kind of lukewarm, what would your advice be? How can you sort of determine, hey, this is only me perceptually, I'm the only one that's excited about it, there's not a real market need for it? Is there a way in which you can go about to figure out whether this lukewarm reception is all just subjective or whether there's reality? Because that obviously will impact on, am I going to go ahead with this or not? Renee.
Hello, everyone. And first, thank you so much for having me here today. So this is a very important question, and this is one of the hardest moments for any founder, any entrepreneur, emotionally and psychologically, if you want to elaborate. But I always say that pivoting early is a strength, and pivoting late is very expensive. That's why we work on sprints and we try as much as possible to pivot early and to change things as soon as possible. So believing in a problem doesn't automatically mean the solution or the timing is right. Because you know that when we start a startup, it feels like it's our baby and we want it to succeed, and we like we think that we're connected to it very like emotionally. So my advice is, instead of asking should I quit, I encourage founders to ask maybe what part isn't resonating with people, And maybe is it the customer segment, the way the value is framed, or the solution itself? Asking these questions will make us to rethink our ideas and our solutions and see it from the perspective of our target market and not from our perspectives. So persistence is powerful for sure, but only when it's paired with learning, with market testing. And if you feel that the feedback is consistently lukewarm, it's not rejection from my opinion. It's more like data. And data is a gift if you're willing to listen. So you should try to learn from your customers, listen to them, see what they are, what the need is in the market, and then pivot and change your idea.
No, I mean, thank you for helping us out there. I think yes, you're right. Data is the gift. You're kind of going to look at the data. Of course, there's still a level of interpretation that's required there. But let me ask you another question then on that, if I can stay with you for a while. I find sometimes that people that want to start their own business approach me, and there's something that's just an annoyance for people, being stuck in traffic, for argument's sake, is just an annoyance, or a long queue at a supermarket, or a movie house. It's just an annoyance. And what people sometimes do is they take an annoyance and they kind of just want to come up with a solution to that, as opposed to being able to identify what we call a real problem. In other words, a problem that actually has some kind of a business potential. So also to make that distinction, because I think a lot of this is perceptual by nature. Like you said, now, the person comes, it's their baby, they want to take care of it, they attach to it, they want it to work, they believe in it, so therefore they want the rest of the world to see the potential that they are seeing. Fine, I go and I do research. But here's the question: how can a founder, I mean, is there some kind of a criteria or filter, that founders can use to tell the difference between a real problem people are willing to pay for? Because I think that's the thing. You got to be able to monetize the solution, and therefore it's got to be like a real problem to solve versus just a common annoyance. How can you help them to determine, is this just an annoyance, or is this actually something that's a good, what we would call, business idea? I mean, I'm going to talk about it a little bit later on towards the end of today's webinar as well, where I look at a business model. It's one thing to have sexy technology. It's another thing to actually put it into a business model. So how would you respond to that? How do I know, in other words, that this is a real problem, i.e. a good idea? Renee.
So first of all, you have definitely to monetize your business. And loving a problem doesn't mean that the market loves it back. It's very important to think like that. And in my opinion, the only real way to tell the difference between a pain people tolerate and a pain they will pay to solve is to leave your desk and go listen to real customers. So when something is a real problem, people don't just complain. They are already trying to solve it. They are trying to invest in solutions for it. So they're spending time, money, or even energy on workarounds. So if they are just annoyed but not changing their behavior, it's probably not strong enough yet. That's why you have to leave your desk, go listen to your real customers, ask them questions, listen to their feedback, because the market is always more honest than our intuition or our gut feeling. So this is my advice. And if you really want to know the difference between a real problem a people will pay to solve or a common annoyance, is to go and talk with your target market and listen to them.
Thank you very much, Rain. I think this talking to target market, it's a theme that keeps on coming up, and that's what we said this afternoon as well. Our focus is going to kind of be, let's start with a real problem, and not necessarily start with what we think is a solution or what I call sexy technology. It reminded me many years ago, I did a 3-day workshop for Johnson & Johnson on marketing strategy. And if you take a group of marketers, and I'm saying this with a lot of respect, if we have marketers online this afternoon, because it's the same for any department. You put people from the same department together and you want them to come up with new ideas, in all likelihood they won't, because they all think the same way. And we had the marketers out there, and one of the targets that they had was to increase the sale of Johnson's baby powder with 15%. And in marketing, as you know, they come up with a strategy primarily to get budget to advertise. So there's 4Ps and 6Ps and 7Ps and price and promotion, and they're going to do, handouts and free samples. And I had 35 very, very intelligent vice presidents, senior leaders, MBA graduates in the room, and none of them really gave me anything new. It wasn't that what they gave me, couldn't work, but it was above the line, below the line, through the line advertising. That's it. And then a high dependency and reliance on, okay, well, if we advertise like this, the market will respond like that, which, of course, those of you in marketing know is not always a guarantee. It's one of the most difficult things to guarantee and justify your spend. And then I remember at the end of the seminar, everybody's left. The tea lady that used to come in during the seminar, cleaning the tables, taking away the teacups, she walks up to me, she says to me, like, would you mind if I say something? And I remember I was kind of taken by surprise because, us in our own biases, if I can speak for myself, I've just been surrounded by 35 very intelligent MBA graduate people that couldn't really solve the problem of the increased use of baby powder. I kind of thought to myself, well, yes, I'm going to give you a chance, but what can you really tell me, that these very intelligent people haven't shared already? Nonetheless, I said, yeah, what do you have to say? She said to me, well, I'm using your product. As a matter of fact, I'm a new mother. I recently gave birth to our first child about 6 months ago. Why don't you just, and she said to me, you know the product, eh? You use it. I said, of course, have babies. And you kind of use it like salt and pepper. You just throw it like that. She said, why don't you just make the holes in the container 15% larger? Because then when people use it, automatically they'll use more and then you'll sell more. And incrementally, that 15% increase is too small for the human eye to see. Now, you can talk about the ethics of what she suggested, but a lot of that spilled over to what Johnson & Johnson ended up doing. And I've always been fascinated by that because the problem that we a lot of times see, we throw it to the expert. Let's give it to the marketers. Let's give it to the strategist. Give it to the accountant. Whilst what we should do is we should throw it open to diversity, because I think complexity is much better served through diversity than through expertise. And in this case, and this is what we've been saying all afternoon, give it back to the customer. The customer will come up with innovative ideas. Why? Well, because they use your product or they use your service. So, as opposed to spending time trying to figure these things out yourself or spending time with people in the same domain, which are experts, highly respected experts, just walk outside the door and connect with customers. So I think spot on what you've mentioned there, Rain. I kind of want to start to move into the second session as well, but I do have some questions still. I just want to make it practical to our users, our listeners this afternoon as well. Jamie, if I can maybe go back to you. You're talking about, we've opened here, we've opened there. What exactly is it that you open? Is this an organization that you belong to? Is it people getting together? Is it a network? Is it an association? Can you tell us a little bit about exactly what it is that you do?
So we run events, whether they are in person or online, and we follow the same format. So it's a format that guides conversation is probably the best way to describe it. And whether it's on Zoom, we use small breakout rooms and put people in for conversations. Guided conversations is probably the best way to describe it. And we help people meet new people. And like you were just explaining there, if we're just surrounded by the same people all the time, we have the same thoughts, the same ideas, and we start to meet new people and we can find new collaborations and new opportunities. We do the same thing in person. We will hire a venue and bring people together and sit them with people that they wouldn't normally sit with. They don't choose who they sit with. So there's always a random nature to this. And then just by getting to know the people first, before what they do and what they fix for customers, helps people build new friendships, new relationships with people that they wouldn't normally meet. So we have licensees similar to franchisees that decide, either in their niche or their sector or their vertical or their location that they want to launch a new group. And that could be online or in person.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rain, last question to you. I'm always intrigued when I meet fellow consultants. Did you start off as a startup, or were you first in what we call corporate, and then from there moved out into starting your own business? Can you maybe just elaborate a little bit on that? And with that, we'll close the first session for this afternoon.
I started first as an entrepreneur myself, so I founded my own startup, and then I fell in love with the entrepreneurial world, and I felt the urge of supporting other entrepreneurs. So that's why I decided to divert my path and got certified to be a trainer, and I started then my journey as a coach and consultant.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, I mean, hats off. You know, it's always difficult, I think, to kick off as an entrepreneur. A lot of people want to get a little bit of exposure first in an industry, and then from there, they sort of migrate out of corporate into the world of so-called self-employment. But that's a great start. Jamie and Rain, thank you so much for getting us out of the starting blocks. Thank you very much for sharing your experience, your wisdom, and some guidance for the participants or the listeners this afternoon. Thank you very much. Okay, all right, we're moving on with the session, and next we're going to talk to a gentleman by the name of Alexandre Boules. He's a seasoned entrepreneur. I love the word seasoned entrepreneur. So that spells success, been around the block. Not always just successes, of course, there might be some failures mixed in there as well, but seasoned entrepreneur and investor with a distinguished track record of scaling businesses across the Middle East and Africa. Scaling is a big word. Everybody talks about, what can you do to scale up? More customers, reduce cost, economies of scale, those kind of things. So very, very interested to hear what you're going to share with us this afternoon. He is the CEO of IBF and Company, and he leads an advisory and investment firm focused on technology-enabled platforms that drive SME growth and global trade. So platform also a big thing these days in the world of technology. I often say to people how the world of I've been in this game now for about 22 years as a consultant, 33, 1 foot in practice and teaching about 23 years. And I often say to people how radically things have changed. Dean at a university, senior facilitator at Harvard Business Impact, but someone with Wi-Fi connection and a bunch of followers out of a garage can on a platform quite easily compete with those like myself that have this massive infrastructure that I've used over the years for training and consulting purposes. So the world has changed a lot. Technology-enabled platforms. Alexandre's extensive background includes senior leadership roles listen to this, at Amazon, where he spearheaded marketing entries into Egypt and South Africa, as well as serving as general counsel for OCI. Today, through investments like Counsel and Diatom CBT, he actively bridges the gap between technology and real economy impact, championing the idea, this infrastructure that's needed for sustainable entrepreneurship and cross-border trade. Alexandre, really looking forward to what you have to say. Welcome and thank you for spending some time with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Stein. Hello, everyone. So now in this session, we'll be talking more about moving from the problem to more into prototyping. So let me start with that startups follow a fairly consistent practical path when turning an idea into a prototype. This process is available online. If you Google it, first, founders ask, what's the smallest thing we can build that proves people will actually want this? For example, a feature. Then they choose a format for that feature, like a sketch or a clickable mock-up. In some cases, they might go up to the extent of putting a basic functional MVP, which is a minimum viable product. Later, they put it in front of real users to observe behaviors and verify whether users are coming back, paying, recommending the startup unprompted. Once demand is proven, startups expand features, they invest in UX, which is the user experience, in infrastructure, etc. For those in the audience that haven't started their entrepreneurial journey yet, or are still in the corporate world like I used to be, surprise, surprise, this process that I just talked to you about is not very unique to startups. In the corporate world, a prototype is synonymous with pilot. I learned, however, from my time at Amazon to reverse the process, which actually coincides a bit with the theme of this webinar. So go to your customer first, which in the corporate world, we used to call it stakeholders management, to understand from the outset who internally will block you, and also externally, who will support you, who will be on the fence. This step used to be critical to have a clear map on buy-ins, indifference, and threats. Then you showed the results of the pilot to all relevant stakeholders, again, internally and externally, to get the green light for your soft launch. This analogy leads me to the core question that I found a lot of founders tend to avoid, especially in their early days, which is, how can I get early adopters buy-ins from the outset while building the prototype? There's an article that I read recently by Dan Coe that actually went viral on the internet. It's called How to Fix Your Entire Life in One Day, which I encourage you to read. One advice that caught my attention in that article is that you aren't where you want to be because you aren't the person who would be there. In other words, if you want a specific outcome in life, you must have the lifestyle that creates that outcome long before you reach it. The same applies in the startup world, in my view. If you want buy-in for your prototype, be it from early adopters or even from investors, you must belong to the ecosystem that incubates both. What most founders do is that they get themselves submerged in building the prototype only to find themselves later falling into the trap of not being able to accurately measure the market response to it. For completion and for the purposes of this session of the webinar, I've actually interviewed the founders of two startups that my investment firm, IBF & Co., invested in, which is Diatom, CBT, FZ, and Council Inc. Diatom CBT is a digital cross-border commerce enabler. Its mission is to help local manufacturers export and sell their products through an automated portal in export markets directly to end consumers, leveraging existing e-commerce platforms like Amazon and Noon. The founder of this startup is an e-commerce veteran. He started working in e-commerce back in the 2000s. I asked him about his journey in building the prototype for Diatom. And my first question to him was, if you had like 10 times the funds you started Diatom with, would it have mattered in Diatom's existence today? And his answer was shocking. He said Diatom might not have survived till today because they would have probably spent most of the money in all the wrong areas. Tariq, the founder, is very methodological. The problem he's trying to solve is helping manufacturers in the Middle East and Africa sell their products directly to end customers in export markets. He spent 5 years understanding the root cause of the problem by working with the government to understand the complexities of export infrastructure like customs, by being employed for a few years at Amazon to understand where the disconnect is and why manufacturers cannot directly use e-commerce platforms like Amazon to sell their products. And finally, with the manufacturers themselves, to understand the traditional export journey and where the challenges truly lie. Working on the prototype, he made a conscious decision not to build the whole portal all at once and then have manufacturers, his customers, try it out. Instead, he decided to break down the process into phases. Onboarding manufacturers' SKUs on the system, researching the competitiveness of these SKUs on export platforms, receiving the actual SKUs in local warehouses, listing SKUs on online e-commerce platforms, shipping the SKUs to export countries, receiving the SKUs in export warehouses, marketing the SKUs on e-commerce platforms, fulfilling orders and handling returns, managing cash balances with e-commerce platforms, managing payments and fund repatriation to manufacturers. The mental model was that each phase had to be mapped out, first manually, then with automation. A decision was made that the first contact with an actual manufacturer would be after a minimum viable product is ready, which was going to be 1/3 automated and 2/3 manual, covering the full cycle from onboarding the manufacturer till paying them back. Another important decision was that prototyping had to happen in a controlled environment. So on the ground, this meant few manufacturers being onboarded, small number of SKUs being exported, and limited e-commerce platforms integration, while automating the rest of the process gradually. Council was different. The journey to building the prototype was different because Council is an ed tech company. It's an education technology company specializing in legal master classes. Ibrahim, the founder, before creating Council, was already in the business of offline legal training courses. He saw the opportunity when COVID outburst and used curfew to plan for building his prototype. Unlike Diatom, Council's prototype was planned to hit the market all at once, not in a staged fashion. Ibrahim knew exactly who his customers were, how to reach them, and what their pain points and needs were. So he decided to act quickly to grab the so-called first mover advantage. In Council's case, the first prototype was a fully functional website. Obviously, it had a limited number of courses and a very basic look, but there was no limitation on the number of users that could sign up. The real purpose of the prototype in Council's case was not to validate the idea or demand, it was rather to better understand how to deliver the experience in the most convenient way and with the best possible optics. So, in summary, the contrasting journeys of Diatom and Council highlight that there is no single formula for building a successful prototype, whether through a phased rollout, like in Diatom's case, or a bold all-at-once launch, like in Council's case. Founders who remain adaptable, customer-obsessed, and willing to test their instincts alongside data are far better positioned to secure early buy-ins and transform everyday problems into sustainable business opportunities. Thank you.
Alexander, thank you very much. There's a couple of questions that we have that's actually come in from the participants whilst you were talking. Not 100% aligned, but also related. I do want to sort of ask you on that. We're going to get to the actual technology and the specific investments that, or the examples that you mentioned here just now. But very quickly, just your opinion. There's two questions that kind of relate to one another, because I've got to do with funding, not so much about the actual product. The one is, and this is a common one, but I'm very keen to get your answer on this. Is it better to start a business alone, as the question that the person is asking here, at the beginning, or wait until you have a co-founder? So that's the one. And I think the other one, which is kind of related to that, because these are both, I think, questions that people are asking because they don't want to be too risk. They want that they're afraid of taking the risk. The other one is it realistic to start a business while keeping a full-time job? So the one is, should I wait for someone to join? The other one is, should I start while I have a full-time job? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think these are very interesting questions. And let me, so first of all, any answer that I would give now will be very reflective of my, own own experience and
Sure.
views, because there could be, like always other ways. Let me start with the second question first. Um, um, 3 years down the road, when I was at Amazon, I realized that like I wouldn't want to continue. Like I fell in love with Amazon, with its leadership principles and how everything works there very systematically. But I also, because Amazon grows in you the ownership and customer obsession, and innovation. I felt that, like, and we always think at Amazon that if you want to decide on something specific, you need to think like, what would you do 10 years from now, and then, work backwards from there. So I asked myself the question, like, would I want to, like 10 years from now, stay at Amazon and be, like a corporate employee? And like the answer came to me at once, no, I want to have my own business. Now, the question whether you could, like do a business on the side, I'll be quite honest with you. And this is something that also one of my mentors told me. Uh, like he told me, Alex, listen, we see that you have a great trajectory within Amazon, but if you're really keen on, like building your business and you want to know later on as, an entrepreneur and building something, you have to burn your bridges. So the fact that like working in a company and like spending a lot of time, it kind of distracts you, and at the same time you always kind of feel that you have a safety net, which is if the business that doesn't work, I always got back my job. I think what should be, so I'm just to answer the question in a straightforward manner. I'm with the like the idea that if you're really keen on starting a business and you know what you wanna do, I think you should do it and focus 100% of your time and energy on it. Now, in order to do it, this shouldn't be a decision that is taken abruptly. It has to be something that is planned for. And there has to be some sort of a transitional period where, for example, you calculate, okay, how much money, for example, I have to sustain my lifestyle, sustain my family, and this will help me for, like how many months, if not years. These type of calculations are extremely important. But I'll tell you now from the outset, there will be times when you will have a lot of pressure. We all passed through this, and everyone who's done as or has been into especially the startups world knows that there will be times when like there will be a lot of pressure. Success is not guaranteed. Actually, it's completely the opposite. 90% of startups fail. So you have, and by the way, being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. So you could do yourself and your family a big favor staying in your job, and you shouldn't also be drifted by what social media tends to sell you on, like the picture of like the founders who made billions and are on their private jets and all of that stuff. This is a very small percentile, but the huge majority, they suffer. Okay, but what I found very common is that they enjoy that suffering, and they are true believers in the problem statement that they're trying to solve, and are extremely connected to their and obsessed with their customers. So that was the one of the questions. The other question was more or less about whether to have a co-founder. I think that I can answer this question by telling you, like, our philosophy at IBF and Co. And when we want to invest in firms, like there are we see a lot of pitches, and we see a lot of great presentations, but this has never been an like a trigger for us to make an investment. What we one of the like what comes on top of the list is for us the founder, so or founders, and and trying to link this with the question that was asked. Never choose or get a co-founder just because you need funding. Okay, you have to choose a co-founder because you believe that this co-founder completes you in a way. You're giving something to your startup, but there's also a gap. There's something else that your startup needs, and this person completes that, complements that part. If the need for a co-founder is just for money, this is more of an investor, not a co-founder. And again, this is exactly what we do. When we want to invest in a company, we really study the founder or founders. We kind of pay attention to the dynamics between them while presenting. We go into the nitty-gritty details of who is doing what and why, and their background, etc. So again, when choosing a co-founder, it's very important to identify whether you professionally and also personally would align and complement each other.
Yeah, I like that approach that you take there, because I think we do sometimes it's speaking as an entrepreneur myself, when you run the business and the business is successful and you have enough revenue that's coming in, it's a little bit easier for you to focus on the next thing, innovation. You have some time, actually have some idle time to even do planning days, strategy days, workshops. You put your people through training, things like that. And I tend to find that the focus is then more on the product, the service, the customer. Whilst if you have financial pressure, like I think a number of you have mentioned COVID this afternoon, COVID hit us as well, and we had the same challenge. Your focus can quite easily shift a little bit to, hey, we got to look at the cash flow. We got to look at funding. We have to decide, how we're going to bridge the gap, until things pick up again. In training specifically, I mean, it took a little bit of a hit because we went from face-to-face to virtual, and then there was an expectation by clients that, hey, because it's now virtual, we should pay less, which is actually quite the opposite. You have to do a lot more when you train virtually as what you need to do for face-to-face. But anyway, that's another discussion. Point is, I think you made a very, very valid point. Don't choose the co-founder just because you need a financier. That's a different criteria altogether. So thank you for that. I completely agree. But just on that point, it can be distractive if you then need to focus on the money, as opposed to, because you can quite easily lose your innovative edge there as well, not focusing on product service and also not focusing on customer. I want to ask you another question, which is kind of related, because a lot of what you deal with probably in terms of investment is return, yes, but I do also think that risk probably plays a big role, because you want it's it's risk and return, invest and return. I got a return on my investment, but there is also that risk that you have to kind of take into account. And you've mentioned something during your initial keynote about a pilot, and then you also made mention of early adopters. So just a little bit of context also for our listeners this afternoon. Marketing does this as well, quite well. Whenever they want to launch a new product, and they work on what we would call a bell curve. So initially you have people, it's a tiny percentage, they are what we call early adopters. So those are the people that kind of, they sleep at night in front of the Apple store because tomorrow the new iPhone is going to be in that store. They want to be first with new technology and new products. So we call them early adopters. And then from there onwards, you kind of try to start to get to about 13.5%, which is the caveat where things normally start to fall into your favor in terms of getting critical mass. And then, the world follows. We all know the Apple story. So when Alexander referred to early adopters, it's within the context of there's something new, technology specifically. You always have those what we call eager beavers. They want to be first. They almost do it for themselves, not necessarily for any other reason. So on that, if I can put the early adopter mentality together with this pilot that you are referring to, what I've sometimes found is that people want to start a new business and now they have a prototype. They're spending a little bit of money on the prototype because they want to get a feel, is there actually going to be an uptake on this? But then what they sometimes do is they don't want to spend too much on the prototype because they still have at the back of their head, what if this doesn't work? They kind of spend all my money on the prototype and it didn't work. And we refer to that as a low-cost prototype. So question to you, at what point does this so-called low-cost prototype stop helping the validation of what you're trying to determine here and start harming the credibility, specifically with early adopters? Can you elaborate on that for us a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. From what I've seen so far, I think my take on to which extent you should be spending on your prototype. To be honest, from what I've seen, both again at Amazon and outside, like we at Amazon used to use the word scrappy a lot. And like we and by that we refer to doing a pilot, a scrappy pilot, which is very basic, but again with the intention to see whether there will be traction out of it. So I would challenge the premise of that a good prototype that will do well in the market has to have a certain financial backing, because it insinuates that that the ensuring the financial aspects of your prototype are addressed is critical prior to development, which does not always hold true. So take Dropbox, for example. The prototype was a simple demo video, not the finished product. There were many bugs early on. However, users signed up because file syncing, which was the root cause problem, was a true nightmare. And just because Dropbox worked conceptually, users were willing to buy the promise. So, and this is a very good example on, regardless of how much you pay, in certain cases, it would be just an idea, but a very good idea. One that users will be willing to, buy the promise for. So, but again, in other cases, obviously, investors, especially, because I also see this in investment rounds, where you'll find founders who have this great idea, a very clear problem statement, but investors will always will ask them, yes, but we want to see the application, so this they wouldn't want it wouldn't be sufficient for them to just see the presentation and all of that or the data. They actually want to see the exact application and go through it, and that's why I also always kind of advise founders that whenever you're looking for funds, it's very important also to identify the right investor for you. So don't go for for example, if you're at the very early stages of your journey, do not go to VCs that spend in big rounds, because they will probably they expect to see something that you haven't reached yet. So maybe in this case, you will want to go to an angel investor or someone who would actually be more interested in the idea, the concept, and will be willing to take that risk.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I'm gonna stick to that again. Related, there's another question that came in here from one of the participants. I'm going to reword it slightly. The question initially was, how much should a new business invest in marketing? And of course, that has no answer because it's dependent on the type of business. But maybe we can talk percentages here. The actual question is that there is spent in prototyping, pilot, the examples that you've mentioned now. And then you get to the point where I now, let's say I'm going to put together my business case in cases where I have to try to find funding. Is there a fixed percentage of the overall funding that I'm looking for that I should allocate to marketing? I mean, financiers like yourself, do you want to see, hey, they're going to spend 15% of the overall budget on marketing? So the question here is, fine, a lot of costs on piloting, marketing, which tend to be one of your biggest or your bigger costs in terms of getting a business off the ground. Any advice, any guidance there in terms, are you looking at percentages or how do you do that?
Usually, we don't look at percentages, to be quite honest. But I'll put myself in the founder's shoes. It's very important to determine what is the purpose of the marketing at this stage, right? Are you investing in marketing because who is the audience that you're trying to get to with the marketing? And this should and revert this back, and this should kind of determine for you your marketing strategy and how much spending you want. So for example, if the purpose of the marketing, like in Council's case, the tech company, so they spend a lot of marketing, for example, on Meta, because they have their website. Their marketing is really directed towards getting more users and more traffic on the website. So this is clear. Now, for Diatom, for example, they don't want to have customers. They don't want to have more customers because this will be a bigger problem for them to handle a lot. They want to have, like I said in my keynote, they want to have some sort of a controlled environment. So marketing, in this case, could be still done, but with the purpose of, for example, getting into the right networks to get more funding for the next round. So again, you can't really determine a percentage, because this will be very theoretical in my view, and you will never be able to stick to the percentages that you determined. But my advice would be to kind of understand who you want to get to, okay? And work backwards on defining your
Yeah.
marketing strategy and the budget allocated to it.
I think that's a very solid answer. I think that the thing that a lot of founders also in my experience, what they struggle with is, this is always my first question to them, who are you targeting? Who's your market? Is like, can you, like, families? Is it older people? Is it executives? Is it, tech junkie? Who's your market? I think that's more the key question to answer, as opposed to, how much you're going to spend. Alexandre, one more question, last question, for your keynote, and then we'll move on to the third session for this afternoon. Sometimes you find, and again, to this pilot that you're talking about, founders sometimes are struggling to determine, whether these early challenges are just something that requires more resilience, or whether the idea is really fundamentally flawed. I mean, the question is, how can a founder distinguish? Is there a way? Again, almost like I asked Rain as well, are there filters that will help a founder to distinguish between early challenges that really just requires resilience and persistence, and signals that the idea itself are actually fundamentally flawed? Last question.
Yeah, so I've watched actually a master class given recently by Sam Altman. Sam Altman is the founder and CEO of OpenAI, that owns ChatGPT. So Sam Altman, according to him, the 4 areas you need to excel at to maximize the chances of success of your startup are: great idea, great product, great team, and great execution. So in his view, the outcome is somehow idea multiplied by product, multiplied by team, multiplied by execution, multiplied by luck. And luck is a random number for him between 1 and 10,000. So the odds actually are really that much. And that's the reason why we all heard the saying that 90% of like startups are doomed to fail. And that's why resilience is key. So take the example of SpaceX. The first SpaceX, of course, we all know it. It's one of the startups of Elon Musk, with the mission to go in space and find other places for human beings to live. So the first 3 launches of SpaceX were literally 3 explosions, and obviously failures. The 4th launch was the last money and last chance. If it wasn't for Elon's resilience, the 4th launch would not have happened, and SpaceX would have ended weeks before its success. And the rest is history. Like we know now, the 4th launch was a success, and SpaceX secured a very big contract with NASA. The only thing I would also add to that is that the other side of the coin for resilience, in my view, is agility or flexibility, something that Ren talked about earlier. It gives you the ability to pivot when needed as a response to what the market is really telling you about your product. So always have, like, as a founder, resilience is key, but it has to be combined with a flexible mentality.
Okay, thank you for that. I know I said it's the last question, but I have a participant that really is pushing for one more question. Annika, I'm going to ask you, can you unmute? Maybe just word your question directly to Alexandre? Do you have that ability? Okay, go for it.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, Alexandre. Lovely
Hello.
talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. I stand with one foot in 2 worlds. Let's just say it like this. And I want to ask a question on this whole sort of startup founder dilemma. If you have in my case, it's a potential customer that has started with an idea. They're basically building a platform, doesn't really matter what. I'm of the opinion that it hasn't followed the correct process, all right? Typically, all the things we've mentioned, or you have mentioned, and your co-panelists have mentioned. Is it possible to get a project, where there has been money like that involved that's gone off route? Is it possible to get it on route again? And if so, how? So
So,
this is not following the ideal steps that we've all mapped out, which you need to follow. This is typically what happens to entrepreneurs. They start with a bright idea, they jump in, they do something, and then they invest decent money in it, and then you could see from the side it's not the right way to do it. What do you do?
I think that the first thing that I would think about is, okay, like I understand that the book tells me that there are certain steps, okay? But now I need to also kind of see whether the very, what I would call peculiar way that this entrepreneur or your customer used, like what is the response of the market to it? If I'm seeing traction, if I'm seeing that the market is surprisingly responding well to the customer, and if I am seeing that there are enough signals that this person has a strong instinct, which is very important, I would actually be okay to deviate from the standards, okay, and believe that he knows his problem well, and accordingly he also knows the solution well. So that's what I would say. Look, I've been also like in a lot of those like events with startups, and I'm personally, while I've been sitting on the investors chair, I've been very frustrated with some VCs and angel investors that kind of have this very boxed advice that they would give to every other founder. It's good that you have the basics and understand them, and understand that are certain standards. And by the way, those standards were given out of the success of crazy founders, people who like when they started, they had nothing to start from as standards and as steps, but they like invented those steps during their entrepreneurial journey. So I wouldn't eliminate the that the chance that your customer could be one. But again, like I would go in with that belief if I am seeing that there are other signs that have to do with how invested the person is, how strong is his instinct, and how deep is his understanding of the problem, and strong is his obsession with his customers. If that makes
Thank you.
sense.
Great answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexander. Yeah, it's back to the customer. Thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna go into the last session. Thank you very much, Alexander. You're staying online with us. Just to maybe throw some questions my way for my session, which is the last one for the afternoon in terms of a keynote. I've put together a small presentation. It kind of helps me just to talk through the things. And so I'm going to work off share screen. Can I just get confirmation? You can see the slide, Alexander? I'm on slideshow at the moment.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Okay. So what I want to talk about is there's a couple of things that I want to try and address towards the closure, but primarily focusing on what we call business modeling, also known as a business canvas. A number of on a number of occasions this afternoon, you would heard that I was talking about, not just a great idea or a solution to a problem, but how do I turn it into a business? How do I make it commercially viable? The term that people sometimes use is, how do I monetize this? So a lot of people come up with a great idea, and at the end of the day, they don't have the skill, the ability, the process, the way to actually put it into a business. And we're going to look at the case study of one of Apple's products this afternoon to try and illustrate that and clarify that. But the first thing that I want to do, just in terms of the audience that we have, if you're a founder, you're an entrepreneur, you look at a business, you're probably confronted with these three things all the time in the business. And the first thing is, whatever it is that you do, there's got to be value in it for a customer. Yes, business exists because there's a problem to be solved. I need transport. The motor car is a solution. The local transport is a solution. I need to get from here to Greece. Going by a ship is a solution. Going by air is a solution. Solutions are there. And then what happens is the customer look at it and the customer goes, okay, I'm going to choose this option. Why? Because these are my specific needs. Now, I choose to fly with an airline because it's perceived to solve my problem. And then, yes, they do solve it on one level, but there's a number of things that I don't like about the airline. They're delayed. I don't like the onboard service. I don't like the options in terms of arrival. There's a whole lot of other things that impacts on you then deciding, well, I'm going to choose the same solution. Again, I'm going to fly next time. I'm not going to go via sea. It takes too long. But I'm going to go for a different airline. Why is that? It's for the simple reason that companies take your money. There's a company that offers something and you as a customer give them money. And for that money, you have an expectation. The expectation that you have is that there's value in it for you going with this specific company. So as an entrepreneur, as a founder to a business, the very first thing that you must ask yourself is, am I offering value in this solution that I'm putting forward? Is there value in it for the customer? Will a human being take the money out of their wallet and put it into mine? And that's a very simple, straightforward human question, and best answered not by yourself as the founder because of your own perceptual bias. Run with your idea out there. Talk to friends initially if you don't want to spend a lot in terms of getting ideas or research. Just put the idea out there. Watch people's reaction. Will they pay for it? In other words, simple language. That's the first thing. And you will then put forward a strategy, a plan to put that into the market. And we spoke about that in numerous shapes and sizes this afternoon, or forms really. Then the second thing is, now that you have this value that you're offering, basically your promise out there to people, you have to find a way in which you can deliver it. How can I bring my solution to people? Now, today we talk of a physical and digital infrastructure. So do I need buildings for this? Is it very capital intensive? Do I have to spend a lot of money on infrastructure? Or is it something that's more labor intensive, not so capital intensive, like being a consultant? Consultant is very easy. You need a laptop and yourself, maybe a car to get you from one client to another. That's it. You're basically in the knowledge industry. You're selling knowledge, you're selling expertise. And of course, today there's a combination between what you can do as human-centered knowledge and expertise and how much you use artificial intelligence to co-create that expert advice that you provide to clients. If you're a consultant, okay, so never mind, you need to have some way, some practical way in which I deliver this value. That's called a business model. And then in the last instance, and I purposely sort of draw these three as a pyramid, because the most important is not the strategy. Strategy is just a plan, piece of paper, and you got a plan scribbled. I'm going to do this and this and this, and this is how I'm going to do it. But it's just a plan. It's like a diet. I want to go on a diet, or I want to build muscles. I can have a perfect plan to do that, but I know that at some point in time, I got to get onto the scale. I got to look at that number between my two big toes, and that's going to tell me whether this strategy is actually working or not. So strategy doesn't hold the competitiveness, but it is necessary because it positions you in the market. How are you going to be different? My airline example. And then, do I have the necessary infrastructure, the physical and digital logic, this business model to deliver what it is that I want to put out there? But lastly, most importantly, the foundation of this pyramid is the things that you do. In everything that you do, or if you have people working for you, their activities need to create value. A business is actually a very simple conceptual entity. You have what we call things coming in. That's input, raw material, skills, money, information. It's coming into your business unit. And you then take that and you have what we call a throughput. Think of it like a washing machine. You're doing something with all of these inputs. And then you have an output. Now, what's very, very important is this output needs to have a lot more value than the sum of all the raw ingredients. And that's what you do with it internally. Raw ingredients. Think about it. You bake a cake. The raw ingredients, you need powder, butter, a little bit of oil, icing. You need raw material. But the outcome is a phenomenal cake, maybe a red velvet cake, and it's high and it's beautifully decorated. You sell it for a lot more than what you paid for the combination of the raw materials. Why? Because what you did, your process and activity, created value. And that's, in simple terms, the concept of a business. Now, today we work a lot with adaptability, flexibility, agility. All our speakers this afternoon spoke about COVID, during COVID this, during COVID that. Well, you basically had two choices in COVID. You were either not going to be able to exist anymore as a business, or you had to adapt to a new world of work, a new world of opportunities, and you definitely had to be willing and able to do things differently. And therefore, when you look at your business model, we always advise founders, don't paint yourself into a corner when it comes to your business model. Try to keep your business model as flexible as possible. Practical example. During COVID, let me also give a COVID example, seeing that everybody else did. I like to go to the gym. During COVID, we were out of lockdown. I go down to the sports show, it's the sports shop in one of the big malls here in Dubai, and I want to buy a pair of shoes. And then the salesperson says to me, man, I'm sorry, but we don't have stock because China is on lockdown. Now, if you think about it, the shoes are being manufactured in China. China is on lockdown, therefore the store does not have shoes. They blame the COVID, they blame the lockdown, they blame the supplier, they blame the fact that we are in lockdown, and that's why we don't have shoes. But on closer inspection, something that I noticed was during the entire time of COVID, I also like a good McDonald's burger. I know a lot of people have various opinions. Maybe it's not the healthiest, but I like a good burger from time to time. And never during COVID did I end up at a McDonald's where McDonald's didn't have stock. So I go buy shoes, which is something that's in a box. It doesn't need refrigeration. It doesn't need to be kept at certain temperatures. It can't go off, so to speak. It doesn't have an expiry date, but I can't get the shoes. And yet a perishable, that all the ingredients that I'm using at McDonald's, they don't have an issue with supply. Also during COVID. And then on closer inspection, I was told that McDonald's over the years, because they're dealing with food, a lot of times in some countries there's a disease amongst the animals that they use the food of, and therefore they have multiple suppliers. So they're not tied in to one central supplier. That's what we mean when we say your business model needs to be flexible. You've got to always think of where's the weak spot? Where, if something goes wrong, can I be penalized in terms of the economic or the business value of my business? So how do I do that? The thing is, I think this has been said 100 times over and over this afternoon. For you to create a business model, I'm going to show you how to do it. It comes from the work of Osterwalder, who is a Swiss business consultant. Now, You got to start, and this is what I said just now to Alexandra as well. You have to know who you are targeting with your product. Otherwise, how are you going to communicate? Even if you have a shoestring budget for marketing, the marketing has got to hit the ears of the right people. So you look, am I going mass market? Is this for the whole world, for everyone? Or is it niche? Is it a very specific small percentage of demographics in a region like here in Dubai, in the UAE? We have a wide variety, a wide range of supermarkets. We have Spinneys, we have Lulu, Carrefour, a huge variety of supermarkets, but they all have a very specific need that they're focusing on to solve. You go to Lulu, it's more price sensitive. You go to Spinneys, it's more quality. So the Spinneys market is smaller, it's niche, it's more high income earners. You have to know, who are your most important customer. You segment it. Is it diversified? Is it a multi-sided platform? And you start there. Now, going back to the ability to offer value. Look, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, today, because we are today in what we call the experience economy. Everything is about experience. You go to a restaurant, it's not about the food anymore. It's about the overall experience. You fly. I mentioned fly earlier. You fly somewhere today. It's not just about flying from A to B. It's the whole experience. You go online, you buy the ticket, you have a call center. It's easy to talk to them. It's easy to make changes on the flights. The actual flying is a very small component of the overall experience. Now, because of that, because of the fact that we are in this experience economy, companies are all competing for a size of your wallet. They don't necessarily need to be in the same industry. I have competing choices to make. Let's say I want entertainment on a Saturday afternoon. What are all the different sources or types of entertainment? Man, I can go to the movies. I can go watch a sport game. I can hang with my friends and barbecue or braai. I can go to a restaurant. I can take a boat cruise. There's hundreds of things that I can do. And a boat cruise doesn't necessarily compete with a movie house. They're not in the same industry, but actually they do, because it's all about the experience. And this is where you have to be clever, because what you've got to be able to establish is what we refer to here is customer needs. Not wants, okay? The wants come on top of, okay? I need to fly from Dubai to Istanbul. I want a business class seat, or I want a choice of 3 meals when I'm on the plane. That's something else. I'm talking about the need. You start with the need. The wants are extra. That's the additional value add that you can increase profitability and size of wallet later on. So you look at that, and you've got to be able to articulate what we call your value proposition in one statement. Remember, I said that that's the promise. I'm offering value. Then you have company capabilities. That again is your business model. Can I deliver this promise? But then there's this thing, fortunately, unfortunately, that we call competition. You're not alone in an industry. Other entrepreneurs, other founders are out there as well, and they want a piece of your market. They want to increase market share, and the only way in which they can do that, if they want to increase it, is to take some of your customers away. So you have to look at competitors' offerings. Now remember, this is very important. Don't just focus on the competitor. You've got to always focus on the customer. There's a beautiful story that's told by Simon Sinek. He was at a conference many, many years ago that was sponsored by Microsoft. And he tells the story where he is in the limousine with one of the partners of Microsoft, the founders, and they're driving to this event. And he's probing to see what the reaction is. He says to the individual from Microsoft, he says, it's very interesting. I used the Samsung tablet the other day, and I was very, very impressed with it. Because he now wants to see what the reaction is. Priceless. The executive from Microsoft's reaction is, well, that's very interesting. And he just carried on working. And Simon Sinek was kind of stunned by this, because he thought that the person was going to take offense. How can you say that somebody else's product is better than ours? And then the executive from Microsoft says something very important. He said, look, some companies focus on their competition. We, Microsoft, focus on our customers. And that's the difference. So yes, keep an eye on your competitors, but your focus need to be customer needs. And then sort of you have that overlap there. We refer to that as a sweet spot. It's where you actually offer something that others don't have. Now, here's the learning lesson for the afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is very important. You heard me a number of times today saying, don't be dazzled by technology. I refer to it as sexy technology. In other words, don't be carried away. Don't think that this technology that you found and stumbled upon is the solution to all. You still have to be able to put it into a business model. Now, why do I say that? I'm referring you to this case study. I don't know whether you're aware of this. Maybe you heard it before. But in 2003, when Apple introduced the iPod, spoke about Apple this afternoon. And on the iPod, you had your iTunes store. This revolutionized portable entertainment. This tiny little thing, you could put it into your back pocket, and you had the ability to download music seamlessly. It created a new market, and it transformed the company. It contributed billions to their market capitalization. So the success story is well known, but what few people know is that Apple was not the first to bring digital music players to the market. And I'm not talking about before Apple, I'm not talking about the Walkman and the big box and the ears. This kind of technology, they weren't the first. A company called Diamond Multimedia introduced the Rio in 1998. That's 5 years prior, 2003. And a company called Best Data introduced the Gabo 64 in 2000. Both of these products work well and were portable and stylish. So what did the one have that the others didn't have? And here's the answer. Apple did something far smarter than just take a good technology and wrap it in a snazzy design. It took a good technology and wrapped it in a great business model. A business model is a living thing. It needs constant attention. You can read this article from Harvard Business Review that was written by Johnson and the late Clayton Christensen and Kagerman. Okay, it's a living thing. It needs constant attention. It needs to adapt because it needs to be flexible, move with the times. It's a dashboard, it's a canvas, and it's a kind of a blueprint on which you map out your ideas so that you can get a logical sequence to it. And this is what it looks like, okay? Now I'm going to take you through this business model canvas very, very quickly because it has a certain sequence in terms of how you complete it. So if you're a founder today and you're on this call, you're sitting out there, you want to start your own business, where you start, there's two things that you got to consider. On the right-hand side is first and foremost, who is my customer or who are my customers? You've got to have an exact pinpoint, aim at a specific segment. Why? Because you have to be able to determine the exact needs. The closer you come to the need, the closer you come to the actual solution that you want to offer. From customer segment, you jump over to the center part, which is the value proposition. The value proposition, remember, strategy, offering the value, business model, delivering the value, and at the bottom, process and activities, creating the value. What is the promise, the value proposition promise that you are making to your customers? And then you start populating the entire canvas. Now, here at the bottom, you have two things. You have money in and money out. All business work on the same premise, on the same principle, sorry. I got to pay for things. I have inputs coming in. Remember my raw material inputs. I buy the stuff. I do something. I pay my people. I pay my rent. I have a throughput. And then I have an output. So there's a cost structure and there's a revenue structure. I sell whatever it is that I put out there in the market. And of course, your logic will tell you my revenue stream has to far outweigh my cost structure. Otherwise, you don't have a business, or at least you don't have a profitable one. It's not liquid. You have key partners you're working with. You have key activities, key resources, customer relationships, and channels. Now, the reason why you identify key, not just resource, key, is what the canvas helps you to do is to try and determine where am I most exposed here? Am I exposed in terms of my channels of delivery? Am I exposed in terms of my customer segment? Are they too small, too specific, too niche? Should I go a little bit wider? Am I exposed in terms of my key partners? Maybe if I lose this partner, I'm dead in the water. Think of the delivery service. Do I use a postal service? Do I use Noon? Do I use an outsourced service? Key partners that will help me to deliver this promise that I've promised to my market. And this is the model that Apple used when they did the iPod. So the first thing that they did is they started with the customer, okay? And the customer was simply mass, everybody. So they determined through their research, everybody would want this product in terms of a possible solution. I just want to see whether I can put on my laser. There we go. So they started there. That's the mass market. Then from there, jumped into value proposition. Now I want you to take note here, and this is where they thought about this offering significantly different from the other companies, their predecessors. It doesn't say on the value proposition, it doesn't say slick, well-designed music technology device. It doesn't say that. It doesn't talk about the product. It talks about the customer's experience. Because the problem was not the technology. The problem was the actual experience. It wasn't the other companies didn't enable a seamless enough music experience. And that's what Apple saw. So this is the first thing I want to highlight. Look at the value proposition. The value proposition does not speak product. It doesn't speak service. It speaks a language that the customer can understand, and that is experience. And hey, what do I have here? A seamless music experience. And then from there on, you start to fill out the other components. So here they have the cost, my people that I have to pay, manufacturing, which is a big thing, marketing and sales. So kind of on an executive level, your key blocks that you're going to need funding for, you're going to have to pay for. But then let's look at the revenues. I go to the iTunes store. There's a revenue model for that. Some music revenues, large hardware revenues. So there were massive upswing because they catered for this mass market, focusing on an increased experience. Everybody out there was irritated at the time, or frustrated really, that they couldn't have such a seamless experience. So they hit that, what I call that sweet spot. And then it becomes fairly straightforward. You go and look at the key partners. They had to talk to the record companies at the time. They had to talk to the original equipment manufacturers at the time, because if I could do a deal with a record company, what do? I bring my costs down. If I could do a deal with the original equipment manufacturers, I bring my costs down. So you kind of look at what it is that I need to do to bring the cost down, because if I can bring the cost down without impacting negatively on the quality, I will again increase margin, profitability per product. And then I look at my key activities, hardware design, marketing. And this is how you populate the entire model. So just to put it into perspective here once again, okay, I have segments, I have value proposition, cost and revenue, and then I start to populate in terms of what I have here. I have, sorry, my mistake there. I have my key resources, okay, the brand, iPod hardware. So you can see that the components, the actual product, the physical product, the piece of technology, it is important, but it doesn't lie central in the business plan, in the business canvas. What lies central in the business model canvas is the value proposition to the customer. And then they have key outlets, the channels. They went through retailers, through Apple stores, also online, apple.com, as well as the iTunes store. And in the process, what they did is they managed customer needs. They addressed it. They offered a solution. Others did before them. They tried, but they got it miss. They definitely had the ability in terms of the cost structure, key resources, key activities, key partners to deliver. And they kept their eye on the competitor. As a matter of fact, the poor performance of the competitor actually elevated their innovative thinking here in terms of offering that solution. And that's what I wanted to share with you this afternoon in terms of my keynote. We have some time left. I'm happy to take any questions either from participants directly or Andre, Alexandre, if you want to ask me some questions, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Stein. I think so. First of all, the presentation was very comprehensive. The only thing that that I would ask, bringing us back, like in the startups space and context. So when scaling from a certain, like a validated niche to a wider market, okay? In your view, like we wanna take the scenario when like things go a bit wrong. So in your experience, which parts of the business usually break first? Would it be like the revenue model, the operations, the culture, or something else, and why?
Okay, thank you. Good question. I'm going to answer it from experience. In my experience, what breaks first typically is the revenue model. And let me explain that. In business, you have, as I said, you have a cost structure, and you have money going out where you have to pay for things, and you have money coming in where you are being paid. So you have what we call a debtors creditors cycle. So my debtors are going to pay me, and I'm going to pay my creditors. Now, it's very important that in number, what you have to pay out versus what you're getting in, what you pay out needs to be less. I think that everybody understands. It's a simple mathematical sum. So if I pay for something and it's going to cost me 2, I at least want to sell it for 5. I deduct my fixed and variable costs, and I'm left with a profit of 1, for instance. But the challenge with scaling is a little bit more complicated, because what scaling does is scaling increases my sales of either a product or service exponentially. Now, what does exponential growth mean? It means that everything doubles as I grow. So today I sell 2, tomorrow I sell 4, the day after that I sell 8, then 16, then 32, 64, 128. 256, 512, 1,024, 2,048. It's very, very difficult to maintain such exponential growth. So what typically happens when companies start to scale their business and they're successful in the scaling is they need to pay more to keep stock as the demand increases, but they're not necessarily getting the revenue back in an equally short time. So all of a sudden, the demand for me to pay more in amount terms increases overnight. I don't get the money back as soon. In other words, my debtors creditor cycle, the time lapse between when I'm getting paid and when I have to pay, that time lapse is too long. And I end up in a cash flow crisis where I have to now find additional funding to maintain this growth. Now, we refer to that as a sustainable growth rate. And it's not always just applicable to scaling, because scaling lies on a very specific level, and there's very specific infrastructural requirements for scaling. But it lies also in the founder that has a niche product. Let's say you're baking something, you're fairly small, you're making a sizable amount of money, and one day you sign that contract with a large supermarket group. And all of a sudden, where you used to sell 100 croissants in a day, making a little bit of a profit, you now have to produce 10,000 in a month. Now, it's a big invitation to the founder. You think, aha, I made it, I'm successful. But if you don't address the debtors creditor cycle, you might very quickly find yourself in a position where you run out of funding to successfully service this new contract. Because what if it's a large retailer and the retailer decides, but we're going to only pay you after 60 days? How are you going to fund it? So in my experience, typically what breaks first is the revenue model. And then what happens, it has then a sort of a vicious cycle. Okay, then it spills over to operations. There's pressure on the operations. We got to work faster. We got to work harder. and soon the culture becomes toxic because the pressure, the financial pressure to now make the business work spills over into capability. We're not able to do it anymore, and that then spills over into how entrepreneurs, business leaders, a lot of time, managers, then deal with this pressure by taking it out on people in the organization. So in that sequence, revenue, operations, and culture. Any other questions?
Very clear. Thank you.
Sure.
No further questions.
All right. Well, we in the last 10 minutes of the afternoon, I don't know whether there's any of the participants that have a question for us. Let me just have a look here. We got, yeah, there's another one coming in here. For someone entering a crowded market, how can they realistically create value if everything seems already done? Okay, what you got to do there, a very, very good question. And it's a little bit generic, it's a little, like everything. What is everything? But I'm going to try and answer you like this. That value proposition offering is also what we sometimes call a dominant attribute differentiator. You've got to be dominant in it. It's got to be a feature, and it's got to make you different. Let's go back to my supermarket examples, okay? So Spinneys, at the top there, the dominant attribute differentiator, quality. So when I go there, I experience all the other things: service, price, variety, range, availability of the product, friendliness of the staff, hygiene of the store. I experience all of them, but there's one that differentiates. Lulu, price is up there, and the other components around. Carrefour, variety is up there, or range, everything is under one roof. This everything, what you do is you look at all the attributes of a product and you see whether there's one that doesn't dominate yet. Maybe hygiene is one, maybe delivery. Maybe you can have a delivery home service. You don't necessarily need large bricks and mortar, but you have the ability to do home delivery. So again, I take delivery, all the other attributes are also there, but now I'm going to dominate on delivery. Fast, friendly, convenient, whatever the case might be. So be careful when you say everything has already been done. If everything is dominated, then my advice normally is try a different industry or try a different product service altogether. Don't try and compete. If you're a small business startup, don't always try and compete with the big players that already dominate the market, because they're going to kill you just in terms of marketing, the budget that they have. So it's very, very difficult as a small-time startup if all the attributes have already been addressed. But if you can find one that hasn't, that then becomes your dominant attribute differentiator. The other question that I have is, if customers recognize the value but aren't willing to pay for it, is the value unclear or is the business model the issue? It's the value. If a customer is not willing to pay for it, the value is not clear. I'll give you a very simple example. A couple of days ago, I had a group of students in my class, and we were talking about this exact thing, because you have to remember, value is also perceptual. Now, what do I mean by that? I said to them the following. I said, if you attend this course from Harvard, and at the end of the day, at the end of the course, I give you a mug, like a souvenir, a mug, but it has a Harvard badge on it, and I give it to you for free. But 3 months later, for whatever reason, you have to sell the mug. And I gave them three prices. I said, what would you sell it for? Would you sell it for $5, $10, or $15? And almost everybody said they'll sell it for 15. Okay, fine. And I would ask them why, and they will say to me, well, it's sentimental, it has value, it's Harvard, it's a big brand. Say, okay, let's turn the table around. Let's say that you're in this class again. You have your certificate, and outside there's a shop, a souvenir shop. And one of the items they have there on the shelf that you can buy is this mug. Now you have to buy it. What would you pay for it? $5, $10, $15. And almost all of them said $5. And I said, okay, I give it to you. You need to sell it. You want 15. But when I ask you to buy it, you only want to pay 5. Now, what is that? That's perceptual value. Okay? So if you have customers and they don't recognize the value, it's because they can't see the value. It's not because the business model is the issue. Either the value offering is not obvious enough, or there isn't real value in what it is that you're offering. Okay, so you can always go back to the market for that answer. All right, okay, people, we are into the last 5 minutes. If there's any last questions, now is the time to ask them. In the meantime, want to just take this opportunity to really thank the participants for your attendance, and also the keynote speakers that we have had for the afternoon. Warm thank you to the Islamic Chamber Training Academy. Just a reminder that they are the academic arm of the Islamic Chamber of Commerce and Development, representing the private sector in 57 Islamic countries around the globe. So very great thank you to them, warm thank you to them. Thank you, Alexander, and Rain in her absence, as well as Jamie. Thank you for the organizers of today's session. And just before we wrap up, I'd like to remind everyone that today's webinar was recorded and it will be available for playback on the ICTA platform. So from my side, thank you very much once again, and stay in touch. Alexander, it would be great to stay in touch with you. Hope we can meet face to face at some point in time. And thank you very much for that. And also to the organizers once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we're done. There we go.